I call the meeting of the Environment and Natural Resources Finance and Policy Committee to order. A quorum is present. Representative Edelson, have you looked at the minutes?
Yes, I have, and I will move those minutes dated, what is it? March 8th.
Representative Edelson moves the minutes for March 8th, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion prevails. The minutes are adopted. Members, we have a very, very full agenda today, and in order to get everybody in, we are going to limit testimony. We will not be able to go having unlimited testimony. We are going to have to limit testimony probably to a minute per person. So, because we have to have time for questions from the testifiers. So, and we will be having Representative Jordan will be the timekeeper. The first bill up is Representative Fischer's Legislative Water Commission. Representative Fischer, would you like to move that House File 1338 be laid over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill?
Yes, Mr. Chair, so moved.
Representative Fischer, to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee, this is a bill to reintroduce the Legislative Water Commission. Currently, it's operating as a subcommittee. The previous commission had been subsetted. I do want to say thank you to my co-authors, particularly Representative Torkelson, who's been very involved with this. What the commission would do, the committee would be able to come together. It would have 6 people from each body and 3 people from each body, from each party. So it ends up being very bipartisan, evenly split, so that there's no one that has power over the other. It provides a great opportunity for us to work throughout the year on water issues that are facing the state. Many of the issues we have are very complex. This allows us to dive in deeper and also allows us to build a wider breadth of knowledge about water issues within each caucus and each body. And I will stop. I know there's several letters of support. I will stop there for any questions.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify for or against House File 1338? Members, any questions to the bill? Any questions to the bill? Representative Fischer.
Thank you for the opportunity to present. I ask for everybody's support and ready to move on.
Representative Fischer renews his motion that House File 1338 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill. The bill is laid over. Members, Representative Lee is in the in another committee. And Representative Pursell. We could start hearing testimony. Maybe, do you want to move Representative Lee's? Representative Jordan.
Mr. Chair, where are we sending to?
674 be laid over. 674.
Mr. Chair, I move that House File 674 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill.
Representative Jordan has moved Bill 674. This is the Community Air Monitoring Systems Pilot Grant Program established, reports required, and money appropriated. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule, but Representative Lee is not here. If Ms. O'Brien would want to testify before Representative Lee gets here to House File 674. Representative Jordan.
Mr. Chair, I move that House File 674 be laid on the table.
House, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The bill is laid on the table. The process will be, we would take that off the table when Representative Lee appears. Next one is House File 637. Representative Jordan.
Mr. Chair, I move that House File 637 be laid before the committee for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill.
Representative Jordan moves that House File 637, requirement modified to analyze and consider cumulative pollution before issuing an air quality permit, be brought before the committee. We have multiple testifiers. Ms. O'Brien, would you like to testify first? And we have.
I'm first.
Yes. And we're on 637, the cumulative impacts, but we have about 20 testifiers, so we're trying to limit.
Minutes?
I'll give you 2 since Representative Lee is not here, so.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. My name is Roxanne O'Brien. I am a member and one of the lead organizers of Community Members for Environmental Justice. I'm a longtime Northsider and do a lot of community work in general. However, a lot of the work that I've done has been around the overburden of pollution in our communities along the industrial corridor, which is also our river corridor. And we began to work with other communities that have brought about this cumulative impacts conversation to the forefront. Probably this conversation's been going on for years before me. However, fully listened to a lot of our conversations and came to our meetings and supported us through this bill. So 4 or 5 years later, we're still up here testifying. And what I want you guys to know is it's not easy living in a community that is overburdened by constant trauma and constant policies that really make it hard for us just to have day-to-day, regular, normal lives. And we can't afford to fight pollution facility per pollution facility. It took us 10 years to fight what was happening at Northern Meadows and to get that support. So I'm here today to ask that you guys correct the wrongs, the historic racial wrongs that have been done historically in my community. And this is not the end of the work, but this is a really good start to what we can do by stopping more of the accumulation of pollution and poisons into our community. So that's pretty much it. There's tons of other testifiers, so I will end with that. Thank you very much.
That was exactly 2 minutes. Thank you. Dr. Laura M. Lara. Welcome. We're going to do 2 minutes since
Yes,
Representative Lee's.
I'll go fast. Always hard to follow Roxanne, but hello, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for giving me this chance to speak. I'm a family medicine physician and I practice in North Minneapolis. I've known for a long time that I wanted to work there. It's internationally known for having leaders, artists, advocates, and that's where I knew that I would most grow personally and in my career. But when it came down to buy a house, I ended up buying one in the suburbs because I'm a mom, and it is well known that the health consequences of living in an area that's heavily polluted, and I didn't want my kids exposed or to get asthma. I'm not proud of that, but it's a well-known fact that some areas are unsafe due to pollution. We study it in medical school, and when you have privilege, you have choices. I would love to be part of the community where my clinic is located and to have my kids grow up learning from these amazing people, but I decided to protect their lungs and deny them community, and I don't know if that was a good decision. I don't know if I would make it again, partly because the value of an intellectual, caring, and driven community is one of the best things you can have for your health and for the development of your children, but it's what I did. And this is what brings us to the bill before us today. The purpose of this cumulative impacts bill is to use the law to reduce inequity, as Roxanne stated, rather than perpetuate it. Historically, these laws have been used to separate black and white, rich and poor, expose certain groups to pollution to preferentially save others from harm, rather than getting these companies to find better ways to do business that produce less pollution in the first place. And these pollutants may cause, or they do cause asthma, they worsen COPD, and many may cause cancer as well. And laws that regulate land use have played a major part in this. I've spoken about North Minneapolis, but this bill would help thousands of people all over Minnesota. The farming folks in my hometown of Wabasha, who face extra pollution as the big factory farms that are taking over the small family operations that have been there for generations. Native Americans, like my husband and my kids, face increased pollution burdens both in the urban areas and on reservations. This is for South Side, Northeast, for communities all across Minnesota. So please remember that as long as we're denying environmental justice for some to benefit others, we're perpetuating inequity and asking human beings
Thank
to
you.
choose between their lungs, yes, and their hearts and minds.
And if you could
Thank
just
for listening to me.
state your name for the record.
Oh, yes, Lara, MD.
Thank you. Dr. Michelle Garvey. Welcome, and state your name for the record.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Michelle Garvey. I'm an environmental justice scholar at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And I'm here today to deliver context in favor of a stricter cumulative impacts bill. In environmental justice studies, we acknowledge that well-worn adage of the environmental movement, we're all downwind. For ecological systems on this planet know no borders. But knowing that environmental risks are distributed and borne inequitably, we qualify that statement to say we're all downwind, but some are more downwind than others. Here are a few more course topics that drive home that reality. Biomagnification. This is a scientific concept explaining how persistent toxic chemicals magnify in an organism's fatty tissues by a factor of 10 to 100 with every link ascended in the food chain. That means that despite their vulnerability, it's human infants who are the ultimate recipients of toxicity. Breastfed infants ingest 50 times more toxics per pound of body weight than their parents. Toxics such as the cancer-causing dioxins released from Minneapolis's Herc trash incinerator, where majority of residents of color are downwind. This means that nursing parents downtown, for them, breast milk is likely the most contaminated of all foods. Body burden. This concept explains the sum total of hazardous exposures a body endures, either the slow violence of, say, the everyday accumulation of vehicle emissions, or the fast violence of immediate point source contamination, say fly ash from recycling facilities like Northern Metals that catch on fire. Endured as asthma and heart disease, Minnesota's body burdens are highest in East Phillips, Minneapolis, where brownfields, heavy industry, and traffic are disproportionately cited. Sacrifice zones. These are the neighborhoods our government has historically deemed acceptable receptacles for toxic waste, chemical production, and heavy traffic, coupled with generational disinvestments. 80% of incinerators in our nation are located in low-income communities of color, and that's not accidental.
Thank you.
Oh, can I continue for 2 more minutes?
Actually, no.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Next up, Jeremiah Ellison, Minneapolis City Council. Tony Quillis, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Tony Quillis. I'm the Director of Environmental Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And Mr. Chairman, we've talked about this previously on other bills that before this committee, that there is a lot of activity in this area, whether it be on the state or federal level. The Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has their environmental justice framework out, along with the EPA, who also has their framework out. There's money in the governor's budget for process improvements to reduce air emissions in environmental areas of concern. And also the PCA budget has some language in there regarding cumulative impacts. The data is out there, whether it's in EPA, EJ Screen, What's in My Neighborhood, or MinRisks. And then also the city of Minneapolis just was awarded $400,000+ for specialized canisters to monitor air on top of the 100 existing monitors they have right now in Minneapolis. Mr. Chairman, when we talk about air emissions, I think it's important to remember also that only 20% of all air emissions are emitted by industrial facilities. And also the Air We Breathe report that was just put out by the Pollution Control Agency shows that industrial facilities' air emissions are decreasing. Mr. Chairman, in terms of the DE1, there are concerns about broad definitions and uncertainty that will create in the regulatory community. Some confusion about the immediate effective date, Mr. Chairman. If there's permits in the process right now, how would they be affected when this bill became law, if it became law, Mr. Chairman? But increased public engagement is important. I think that is a good thing, but I think we should look at in areas of concern that are trying to be addressed in this bill, maybe do a pilot project along those areas, maybe look at specific facilities if there's concern there, because the data is there, the programs are there, and the financial money is there, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time.
Bradley Peterson, Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Again, my name is Bradley Peterson here on behalf of the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. I want to begin by acknowledging that it is quite clear that there are communities in the state that have been failed by our systems when it comes to protecting them from the cumulative impacts of harmful pollutants. However, unfortunately, as written, we must oppose this bill because of its potential impact on growth and economic development in Greater Minnesota due to its overbroad and vague nature. Our first concern is with the broad reach of the definition of environmental justice areas. If you look at a map that all of this would encompass, almost the entire population of the state is going to be either in an environmental justice area, or if you build a facility adjacent, it's going to affect an environmental justice area. And so I would suggest that if so much of the state is encompassed in these concerns, perhaps we need to take a more comprehensive view of how MPCA is protecting our populations from pollution. The second piece that is vague and I think difficult for cities who are going to be applying for wastewater permits and renewing their permits, and businesses who are going to be doing permits, is the directive to do a cumulative impact study. There's very little guidance or understanding in this bill about what that means. And unfortunately, a lot of those definitions are left to MPCA rulemaking. And I would suggest that as you are contemplating a bill of this scope, of this reach, that you leave less to the MPCA to figure out, and that the committee spend more time putting some parameters and guidelines and oversight around this bill. Finally, Mr. Chair and members, there's absolutely a moral imperative to protect our citizens, especially the most disadvantaged communities, from the harmful cumulative impacts of pollution. I would suggest that a more focused approach needs to be taken to determine and address the failings of our current processes in a more targeted manner, and we would be happy to be partners in that work.
Thank you. If you could just state your name for the record.
Bradley Peterson with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities.
Next up, Danielle Swift. Then after Danielle will be Kathleen Schuler.
Hey, how y'all doing? My name is Danielle Swift. I'm a community organizer with Community Members for Environmental Justice. I'm going to be reading a statement on behalf of a community leader and elder, Ms. Rosemary Nevels. Guns Down, Love Up is in support of community efforts to stop big businesses that continue to make profits at the expense of poisoning our residents and contaminating land, creating health issues similar to that of Jackson, Mississippi. Our children have asthma compared to third world countries. It is affecting not only their health, but also their ability to learn. Because of this corporate greed, money over health and environment. I beg you officials to protect our families. In doing so, you'll also be protecting your families. We give peace and blessings to all. Sincerely, Rosemary Nevels Williams, co-director of Guns Down, Love Up. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathleen Schuler. And after Kathleen, Andrea Lovell. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Hansen and committee members. My name is Kathleen Schuler. I'm Policy Director with Health Professionals for Healthy Climate. I'm testifying in support of HF 637. This bill takes an important step in dismantling existing environmental racism, which has resulted in the disproportionate siting of highways and polluting industries in neighborhoods and communities with higher proportions of low income and Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Other affected communities include urban, suburban, rural, and tribal areas. Underlying socioeconomic disparities and higher pollution exposure create health disparities. BIPOC communities experience poorer health compared with their white counterparts, including shorter lifespan, higher incidence of heart disease, cancer, asthma, and diabetes, as well as higher rates of infant and maternal mortality. A striking example, the highest rates of hospitalization and emergency department visits for childhood asthma in the state are located in the 6 zip codes surrounding downtown Minneapolis that includes North Minneapolis and Phillips neighborhood, where a majority are BIPOC and low-income communities. This bill protects these and other communities from being burdened by additional pollution sources. It's time to rectify past harms to communities which have been on the front line of transportation and industrial systems that place their health and economic well-being at risk. We thank Representative Lee for authoring and the committee for hearing this important bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia Benrud. Andrea Lovell, and then Sophia. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair Hansen and members of the committee. My name is Andrea Lovell. I'm the Legislative Director at Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy. I also grew up in environmental justice areas and have a battery of health consequences as an effect. Our experiences don't need the validation of data, but we have it anyways, as detailed in previous testimony. This exists from design, not by coincidence. I've included a map in your packet that shows zoning from the 1930s. Looks like this. The blue and green areas on the map display the most desirable neighborhoods from then. The areas with red and yellow are undesirable and declining. So what made your neighborhood more desirable in the 1930s? Having few or no Black people living in them. Deeds for desirable neighborhoods typically included the following or similar language. Quote, the premises hereby conveyed shall not at any time be conveyed, mortgaged, or leased to any person or persons of Chinese, Japanese, Moorish, Turkish, Negro, Mongolian, or African blood or descent. Having this specific language in your deed meant that your property was less hazardous. The red and yellow areas on this map are areas where people of color were legally allowed to reside and therefore deemed as hazardous areas. If you were an industry looking to move to Minneapolis, the city's zoning code would prohibit you from a blue or green area on this map. The city and developers then concentrated industrial development in and next to the areas that were already deemed hazardous, i.e. where people of color lived. Local and state governments wrote permitting laws, zoning laws, and real estate laws with explicit racism to concentrate pollution where they purposely relegated people of color. And that's why we call this environmental racism. Racist real estate deeds are no longer allowed, but our permitting laws for polluters are woefully behind and still enable the continued concentration of pollution in certain areas. Nearly 60 years after we abolished racial covenants, the impact of zoning laws continues to lower the lifespan.
Sophia Benrud, and then Carolina Ortiz.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House File 637. My name is Sophia Benrud. I'm a co-founder and organizer with the Minnesota Environmental Justice Table, an organization working to build power to guarantee environmental justice across Minnesota. But I'm also a community member that takes great pride in calling Minnesota my home. I support this legislation because it provides community protection from environmental exploitation and extraction while also preventing exposure to new pollution generated by facilities that are built in overburdened communities. I'm a semi-transient child. I was. I live in Minneapolis and I lived in Moose Lake, Minnesota throughout my childhood. In fact, I lived right next and down the street from Moose Lake's prison. I rode my bike down by the prison on a regular basis and was told to stay away in general, and at one point the warden ignorantly invited me to visit, and I said, no, I'm good. I'm not interested in seeing people in cages. My father was previously incarcerated. I know his power and worth. I have always known he wasn't meant to be in a cage. I'm here supporting the protection of people that are incarcerated, children, elderly folks, people living with disabilities, low-income folks, queer and trans folks, Black and brown folks, and so many more. Environmental justice affirms that everyone has the right to clean land, water, air, and food. However, we know that this is not true for all Minnesotans. There aren't any expectations on air quality for prisoners. Discriminatory acts by the state and local government have shaped landscapes around us. Minnesota has the third largest number of incinerators in the United States, with 6 out of 7 of those facilities being placed in EJ communities. 9 out of 13 of Minnesota's correctional facilities are located in areas considered EJ communities as well, and some of these spaces have both. We have need to need to begin considering the cumulative impacts of population on everyone, particularly those most impacted by environmental harm and those with the least control or financial backing to radically change their material conditions.
Thank you.
These communities our communities are not disposable, like my father isn't disposable, and they deserve the same opportunities and beautiful futures, and I believe we deserve a just transition like the rest of the world.
Thank you. Representative Lee, so we are on House File 637, and we're taking testimony. The previous bill, House File 674, we brought up, did not take any testimony, laid it on the table. We will bring that up after we deal with 637.
Sounds good, Chair.
Representative Lee, would you like to present the bill now, and then we continue with testimony?
Thank you, Chair, and apologize for that, members. I was in the Climate and Energy Committee, and so, Chair, I do want to present House File 637. This is a bill that I've been bringing forth the last few bienniums to discuss to require the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency to consider the cumulative impacts of past and current pollution for our water, air, and land before issuing or renewing a permit. And with that, Chair, I do have the DE1 amendment.
Would you like to move the DE1 to get the bill in the shape you would like?
Yes, Chair.
Representative Lee moves the DE1 amendment to get the bill in the form he would like. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion prevails. The bill as amended. The DE1 is adopted, and 637 as amended. Representative Lee.
So, Chair and members, this bill is different from the iterations that have come before the committee. Having spoke with community advocates and the MPCA, trying to make sure that we get language that works for everyone. And so what I have before you all today, I'll just walk through that. Subdivision 1 is the definition of subdivision, where we define what is a compelling public interest, what is cumulative impacts, what is environmental justice, what is an environmental justice area. We define environmental stressors and major source. Subdivision 2 is where a cumulative impact analysis is required when an applicant is seeking an air or water permit or permit decision for construction of a new facility, expansion of an existing facility that will increase the volume or toxicities of pollutants from the facility, reissuance of a major source pollution permit or a major permit amendment that's located in an environmental justice area or whose environmental impact may affect the environmental justice area. Then we move on to subdivision 3. Any permit applicant or permit holder who is required to conduct a cumulative impacts analysis must hold at least one public meeting in the EJ area impacted by the facility before the commissioner issues or denies a permit. The permit applicant or permit holder must publish notice containing the date, time, and location of the public meeting and include it in a newspaper of general circulation, post physical signage in the EJ area, and provide the commissioner with notice of the public meeting. The commissioner must post the notice and cumulative impact analysis on the agency's website at least 30 days before the public meeting. Also, the permit applicant or permit holder must provide an opportunity for robust public and tribal engagement at the public meeting, accept written and oral comments as directed by the commissioner from any interested party, and provide an electronic copy of all written comments and transcript of oral comments to the agencies within 30 days of the public meeting. If the permit applicant or permit holder is applying for more than one permit that may affect the EJ area, the applicant or permit holder may request the commissioner to require that the facility hold only a single public meeting to address all the permits that are being sought. The commissioner may incorporate conditions in a permit or for a facility located in or affecting the EJ area to hold multiple in-person meetings with residents of the EJ area affected by the facility to share information and discuss community concerns. And then subdivision 4 governs the permit decisions by the commissioner. In determining whether to issue or deny the permit, the commissioner must consider the testimony presented and comments submitted in public meetings. The permit may be issued no earlier than 30 days following the last public meeting. The commissioner must deny an application for a permit in the EJ area if the commissioner finds that issuing the permit in combination with the public health stresses present in the EJ area would contribute to adverse cumulative environmental stresses in the EJ area unless the applicant and community-based organizations or coalitions representing residents' interests enter into a community benefit agreement, and there's a compelling public interest to issue the permit as determined by the commissioner based on criteria that will be established in rules. If the commissioner determines that a compelling public interest exists, the applicant enters into a community benefits agreement with the community, and the agency may grant a permit that imposes condition on the construction and operation of the facility to protect public health and environment. If a permit is issued, the facility must provide information to the community describing the health risk that the facility poses, and a community benefit agreement must be signed on or before a new permit or permit amendment is issued in the EJ area. And then rulemaking, the commissioner must adopt rules to implement and govern the analysis and issuance or denials of the permits for facilities that impacts the EJ area. During rulemaking, the PCA must engage in robust public engagement and tribal consultation, including having public meetings. The rule must define conditions, criteria, or circumstances that qualify as a compelling public interest, establish clear quantitative criteria for establishing whether a facility fulfills an essential environmental health or safety need, establish benchmarks that protect public health, establish procedures for entering into the community benefit, establish the content of the community benefit agreement, establish a process and form submitted to the agency for the petition process, and then establish and define criteria for requiring a cumulative impact analysis, establish a process for conducting cumulative impact analysis, and maintain an updated database of the identified stressors and specific census tract. And then the agency must provide translation services and translated materials upon request during rulemaking. And the agency must provide public notice on the agency's website at least 30 days before the public meeting is held on the rulemaking. And so, Mr. Chair and members, I did, go a little bit more in depth with the DE, but just want to make sure that everybody understand, what's being seen here. And as you may recall in the discussion, we're not really specifying, or is not being as specific as what we had in previous bills. And, we really want the MPCA to work with community advocates and, people who are seeking these permits to really go through the rulemaking process to make it clear when is it that's required, and what are we really looking at when we're talking about these cumulative impact analysis.
So Representative Lee, we're doing 2 minutes per testifier, and we're kind of halfway through. So if we could start again there, and then maybe take questions from members when the testimony is. Carolina Ortiz. And next up after that will be Shannon Hayden.
Chair Hansen and members of the committee, my name was listed on the list, but we have Christy Ellickson with Union of Concerned Scientists that will speak on my behalf.
Oh, okay. You could introduce yourself for the record, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. My name is Christy Elix, and I'm a fellow at the Union of Concerned Scientists, which is an independent, nonprofit organization advocating for science-based solutions. My research at UCS is in the area of cumulative impacts. Before coming to the UCS, I worked as a state scientist for 14 years at the MPCA. I'm here to tell you that there is science to support this bill. One, it is well known and measured that people are exposed to multiple chemicals at once, not from a single source. Two, we are exposed to pollutants by breathing, eating, drinking, and by touch with our skin. This means that there needs to be cross-linkages in environmental permitting between water and air, for example. Three, pollution exists disproportionately in communities of color and low-income communities. This has been measured, it has been estimated from computers, it has been demonstrated for many pollutants for many types of sources over and over again. Four, exposures to mixtures of chemicals versus single chemicals can produce different or worse impacts. 5, there is a growing area of scientific studies showing that chronic stress or social adversity can worsen outcomes from chemical exposures. So what does this all mean? It means that we have a regulatory system that is not fully evolved to address the unequal distribution of pollutants in our state or country. Community groups have been advocating for these protections for decades. This bill is a solution to begin to decrease disproportionate impacts felt in Minnesotan communities. And finally, because Minnesota was the first state to integrate a form of cumulative impacts into permitting, Minnesota has experience and is well positioned to do this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon Hayden. Then Sherlyn Young. Welcome to the committee, and state your name for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. My name is Shannon Hayden. I live on Morgan and Plymouth in North Minneapolis. As a North Side resident and a felon, I have come to ask you to support House File 637, the Frontline Communities Protection Act. People in my neighborhood are struggling to get by every day. We don't always have time to stop our daily duties and fight for our rights and our health. I, along with hundreds of other felons that reside on the North Side, haven't had the chance to vote and make our want, our need for a healthy community available to us. We will in July. North Minneapolis is overburdened with pollution. Not only does Hennepin burn their trash in North Minneapolis, we have the shingle factory, and we have the pollution from I-94. We have asthma rates 6 times higher than the state average. I have asthma. My daughter has asthma. My grandson has asthma. My granddaughter has asthma. My niece has asthma. My daughter-in-law has asthma. We are all Northside residents. Back in 2019, yet another study showing the relationship between environmental pollution and violent crime was published, this time from the University of Minnesota. Not only does North Minneapolis have some of the worst pollution in the state, our community faces threats of violence and crime every day. I get emotional.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sherlyn Young.
Dear Chair Hansen and members, I fully support the concepts, the thinking, and the work behind HF 637 because, in my words, it proposes a way to get and use factual and current information which will help guide governments and people to make good decisions, including you and me. What I mean is evaluating the pre-existing condition of both natural environment and human health, and using that information to make decisions and changes which don't harm communities but make them better. I live in one of the environmental justice areas outlined in the bill, the west side of St. Paul, which is just a couple of miles from here. And it has been central to the development of the state and the capital city. And what I mean by that is people have lived there for a long time. The west side was home to the Dakota people before they were forced west by settlement. In its history, St. Paul's west side was important for farming and for food, industry like brick and beer making, and river-related activities. People lived there, worked there, formed families and communities as the city grew. And I'm not just talking about the city of St. Paul or the state of Minneapolis, I'm just talking about my neighborhood within half a mile and 3 miles from me. The city industrialized and built the NSB coal burning plant, by the High Bridge, the Holman Field Airport, and the industrial development at Southport. The Mississippi River was dammed for commodities shipping, and authorities cited a garbage dump and the regional wastewater incineration plant at Pig's Eye. due to not only that history, but the transportation systems that accompanied it, air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions are a serious concern. And my community is still here, and we need change. Because we understand this history and its impact, we have new knowledge and technology at our disposal. We need to look at our health and natural resources differently.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you could just state your name for the
Sure. My name is Sherilyn Young from St. Paul.
Princess Titus. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for having me today. I'm Princess Titus. I'm one of the co-founders of Standard Edition Women and Appetite for Change. I'm here representing community members for environmental justice. I've worked with and served in North Minneapolis for about 28 years, and you've heard the data, you've heard the stories, you know what's there. So I'm bringing a poem that was written by my son when he was 14. He said, "If we fight to breathe, will they hold us down? Will they lock us up? When living in the U.S., why doesn't it feel like it's about us? I play nice with my friends and they still put us in cuffs. You know it's hard to stay focused when this society's corrupt. It seems like they don't give up, but we'll never give up. We're all living to die, but my people are dying too much. Why in this generation is there no humanity and trust, and corporations step on us like our lives don't matter too much? Chasing that American dream until you recognize it's not what it seems. We got to wake up and realize these are marketing schemes to get the brand new jeans and get the newest TVs. These looks are here to deceive, confuse our wants with our needs. Because my friends and my trees, we're all just praying to breathe, begging to breathe. Can we breathe? I just had to read that because he wrote this when he was 14 and he's 30 now. And so we're asking that same question. Can we just breathe? Thank you.
Thank you. Audra Pugh, Board Chair at Jordan Area Community Council. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As a resident of North Minneapolis, we suffer the worst disparities in the state of Minnesota. Studies have been conducted in each green zone about the polluters and the roles they play in the green zones to help with the health disparities in BIPOC communities. GAF, Northern Metals, the Herc, Smith Foundry, and the potential unleashing of the arsenic at the Roof Depot is poisoning our communities. Type 2 diabetes, heart disease, asthma, and cancer have impacted the lives of our neighbors and taken the lives of some of our loved ones. I stopped smoking 5 years ago, and now sometimes when I breathe, I whistle. When I wheeze and I whistle when I breathe. Supporting this bill with the full weight will ensure that organizations like Rusty and the Crew and others can continue to educate and inform our neighbors on environmental justice, recycling, reusing, composting, gardening, and shifting all of our mindsets to not only take care of ourselves and one another, but our precious environment as well. Thank you.
If you could just state your name for the record.
My name is Audra Pugh.
Thank you. Tom Johnson, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, Tom Johnson, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. First, want to thank Representative Lee for bringing this important bill forward. MPCA, I just want to make it clear, I know we have a time crunch here, but we recognize that it's critical for the agency to further consider the cumulative impacts of pollution when making permitting decisions. This is major priority for Commissioner Kessler and for the agency as a whole. As Representative Lee noted, there's been an iterative conversation between the agency, between environmental justice advocates, and Representative Lee and the Senate author. We're committed to that conversation continuing to go forward. I think I really want to thank community members and environmental justice advocates and Representative Lee for this tireless collaborative work. It's really come a long way, especially over the years, but especially this past year, where we've really come close together and starting that hard work of figuring out the details on this. There's still work to be done on that note. I'd say I want to call out there's some the governor's language starts on Article 2, Section 63 of House File 2310, the governor's budget recommendations introduced by Chair Hansen. So if folks want to look at that language and compare and contrast, but a couple of items, I'm not going to cover them all, but there are a couple definitions in here. Compelling public interest is defined both in the bill and in statute, and then also in rulemaking. So we do think it's important to have that defined in rulemaking, as it might, defining public interest might affect other parts of statute. The environmental stressors definition is also one that's really important to get right, as it determines which permits and when the commissioner must deny a permit. So we're committed to working together on that one. 2.17.
Thank you.
Drastically expands the scope of the bill, and I just want to say thank you again for the opportunity to testify. We're committed to this work. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the audience who would like to testify for or against the bill? State your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Craig Johnson with the League of Minnesota Cities. Very much appreciate the time that's being spent on this today. League of Minnesota Cities does recognize the need to significantly improve our state's performance in environmental justice and the environmental performance of our permits to protect folks in environmental justice neighborhoods and communities. That said, we do have some continuing concerns in the DE1 amendment. We'll be happy to continue to work with the chair and the author and the administration on those. Very briefly, we believe that the criteria used to identify environmental justice areas in this, which is a 1 of 3 factor, and the inclusion of the phrase potentially affecting does essentially make this a statewide. So virtually every permit would need to include this assessment. The addition of Chapter 115 includes all wastewater and stormwater permits in the state, every single one of them. So every community wastewater plant, every community with a stormwater permit, at least every 5 years would need to do a cumulative environmental assessment of any potentially affected environmental justice area just to get their permit renewed, even if no changes were made. We think that that goes a bit too far, and we think that there needs to be a more reasonable approach to this that can still accomplish the goals desired. We do share some of the concerns that were mentioned in earlier testimony. I will not repeat those. And then the last one I would mention is the enactment date is problematic because obviously it goes into effect before the rules have even started, much less been completed. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and look forward to working with the author and others on the bill.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify for or against the bill? Anyone else? Then we will start with questions. Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. So it's always important to me that state and federal governments are working together and have consistencies. So what action is being taken at the federal level on environmental justice areas?
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's a good question too, Representative Jacob. What I know is that, with the Biden administration, where they're making investment, through the Inflation Reduction Act, through IIJA, they're making sure that environmental justice is a focus in on that. But to the extent that they're looking at cumulative impact, I don't know.
Representative Jacob.
Just one follow-up question. And so does the MPCA then, do they have maps already established for areas that are currently established as environmental justice areas?
Representative Lee.
Mr. Chair, I would defer to the MPCA about their current processes.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, Tom Johnson, Government Relations for MPCA. We do have an internal definition that we're working off of, Representative Jacobs. And so we have some maps that we've put on our website, and it's overlaid with our permits across the state, so you can look at that. This would establish a new definition of environmental justice in our statutes, and so we do not currently have those maps up on our website of what this definition would expand it to.
Representative Jacob.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Edelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Lee, for bringing this bill. Like your testifiers talked about, I grew up in North Minneapolis, and I can tell you, my mom, being a single mom, didn't have time to go to city council meetings. She was not present at a lot of where the decisions are making, the decision tables. And you think about, too, what your bill is really doing is that conversation that's more holistic about, we've always talked about jobs. This business brings jobs, or this brings jobs and it will help bring the economy to our community. But we don't talk about what it does to our water quality, what it does to our air quality. And I think those are conversations that we have to have more holistically now, and making sure that we can engage people and the public on that in a more equitable way. And so I think your bill really takes a step to do that, and I appreciate the work here.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Finke.
Thank you, Chair Hansen and Representative Lee, for bringing your bill. As you know, I support this bill. I think this is one of the most important bills we'll do this year. And I just wanted to note that we had two testifiers come up to represent cities, small cities. I think it was Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, and then another one. And both of them were concerned that we were defining environmental justice areas too broadly. And if I were living in a city that was qualified as an environmental justice area, it would make me nervous that we were trying not to cover those cities in this bill. If we are creating a definition of environmental justice area and that's reaching more people, then we need to take the advice of our testifier and we need to explore why that is and how MPCA can better address this problem. This is not a problem that expands. If we expand the problem, we're not making the problem, we're not solving the problem, we're realizing how big the problem is and we need to solve it better and more effectively. If it's reaching outside of these historical environmental racism areas that we all know exist, then that means, yeah, we are failing and we're going to continue to fail. And more people are going to come back here in 10 years and then we will have the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities saying, oh, we should have listened and created these areas and these rules then. Because it's not okay to just say, well, it's a problem there, but we're going to just wait until it's a problem somewhere else. So those are my remarks.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Chair. Representative Lee, if you could look at line 2.16, there was testimony that alluded to this, but I don't know that you've had a chance to respond. So I'll ask the question. At subdivision 2, this cumulative analysis when required, a permit applicant located in an environmental justice area going on to 2.17, or whose environmental impacts may affect an environmental justice area, finishing in line 2.18. That's been described as troublesome and broad. Could you address why you have written the bill this way? And I'll just mention your testimony earlier in committee when you said that you've been working on this for a long time. And I'm aware of that. But for the committee's benefit, for the public's benefit, I want to highlight it because the governor doesn't support this bill, MPCA doesn't support this bill, and it's been around. And the problems that have persisted in the past seem to persist currently, and it hasn't changed. So this being one of them, I'd like to better understand why, in light of the many that have tried to address this, why it's still here.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Representative, for the question and the remarks. And I would say this, that I'm not speaking on behalf of the governor or the administration, but they have their own proposal getting at the same issue. And so I think that's for us to determine if they support that or not, because they do have that, and that's included in the chair's bill for the governor. And so relating to the language that we have here, this is in working with the administration and the advocates to find language that works for everybody. And I would say that, the community advocates actually want me to say that, hey, we should look at permits that are within 10 miles of EJ area. And if we did that, and having conversation with the MPCA, that would cover 98% of the permits. And that's what I don't want us to do. And so that's why we're continuing to work with the MPCA and the advocates to make sure that we could address not just those facilities within the EJ area, but if there's a facility just outside of the EJ area that's going to still impact them, as what we have heard from the public, that's still in consideration of cumulative impact analysis too.
Representative Heisman.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll try to go back to the very specific line, whose environmental impacts, line 2.17, may affect an environmental justice area. So how would a facility know if they may or may not impact an environmental justice area? We already heard in testimony that there may be maps that could define this. We also heard in testimony that the enactment date complicates that because that data might not actually be able to catch up with the requirements in this bill in terms of enactment. But to get to it, there may be facilities that you're capturing in this language that don't even know that they're having impact, but yet could be subject to fines or other things. I mean, I'm not totally clear what their challenges might be if this were to become law, but that's why I'm asking the question, because I don't know. I don't know that the groups know. And it appears that a lot of other folks don't know who are testifying.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Chair. And that's why, in rulemaking on line 5.3, establish and define criteria for requiring a cumulative impact analysis. So that would be determined through rulemaking, where everybody in the public have an opportunity to engage with the MPCA as they determine the process for requiring the cumulative impact analysis.
Representative Heisman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the additional time. Representative Lee, I would suggest tightening up the language as opposed to leaving it to the MPCA. Just leaving it up to rulemaking is ambiguous. That doesn't answer the question, Representative Lee. Please look at this language. If this became law, Lord have mercy. I mean, there's too much going on here to just leave it up to an agency to resolve in rulemaking. It needs to be done by us as legislators to make sure that the bill does not have unintended consequences. It hurts rather than helps.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the comment, Representative. And I do agree that, we should exercise our authority and power as the legislative branch to put that in law or rules, that should that be our decision. And, I look forward to working on the language still with the advocates and the MPCA. And, if there's more clarity that we want rather than leave it for rulemaking, I'm open to that, and I will have that conversation with the advocates and the agency. Thank you, Chair.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Lee. As I look at this bill, and I think about what we experienced yesterday here in this body, and the members who participated in Sovereignty Day, I learned some new things. One of those things was usufructuary rights, and based upon what we've discussed here, the way that you have designed this bill, rulemaking, and the way that state agencies engage with the legislation that we bring forward, I share Representative Heinzman's concerns about how loose this is written and the way that it particularly could be interpreted through the state agencies. That's why we're here to do this good work. I understand that, I believe the motion here is to lay this over. And so my concern here is that we need to take action on this. And this obviously, we just adopted this amendment to the bill. And so when you look at may on these different lines, and then you learn about rulemaking, that literally says like every single treaty that has ever been signed in Minnesota could have direct jurisdiction over future industrial development in our state and the current job creators that are at work here. So Representative Lee, can you share with us what your willingness would be to change the bill to better define the scope of this bill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Representative. You know, I think that when we started out 2 years ago, it was too specific, and now, you know, we're giving too great of a latitude for the agency. And so, Representative Schultz, if you have any language that you are thinking in particular, I'm willing to entertain that as we move the bill forward.
Any other? Representative,
Thank you, Chair Hansen. And Representative Lee, I would be remiss if I didn't say that I would happily work with you to put that rule as we would like it to be in this bill, so we can decide that. If that's what the other side wants us to do, I'm happy to do that with you.
Representative Lee. Any other questions? So Representative Lee, Representative Jordan made the motion. You want to renew your motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that House File 637 as amended be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill.
Bill's laid over.
Mr. Chair,
Representative Jordan.
I move that House File 674 be taken from the table.
Representative Jordan moves that House File 674 be taken from the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Ayes have it, the bill is before us. To House File 674.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. House File 674 is a bill to develop a community air monitoring system pilot program. As we have heard, you know, air pollution is a critical issue for communities like mine in North Minneapolis, who often face higher exposure to pollutants and who may experience greater responses to pollution. And just, you know, by way of background, a lot of my neighbors who are here have already talked about this, but you know, even back in 2017, when the Department of Health and the MPCA did a report around the air that we breathe, area code 55411 and 412 in my district has some of the highest rates of asthma hospitalization in Minnesota. And so this bill addresses the needs of communities like mine for more local air quality monitoring by creating a pilot program so communities impacted by air pollution can use the local data collected to develop strategies to reduce pollution in their communities. The pilot program is established to measure air pollution levels at many locations within the environmental justice area in the city of Minneapolis. Eligible applicants include nonprofit organizations and groups located in the EJ area who have experience deploying, operating, and interpreting data from air monitoring system. Eligible project proposals include using a variety of air monitoring technologies approved by the commissioner of the PCA to measure air pollution levels. Another project proposal is to obtain data at fixed location and from handheld monitoring devices that are carried by residents that could provide high frequency measurements using the air, monitoring data to generate maps of pollution levels throughout the monitored area, and then providing the data to help agency decisions, including placement of their stationary air monitors and whether to require mitigations of emissions at facilities that are in or near the EJ areas, and, you know, to help guide decisions made by other government bodies regarding, you know, transportation or land use planning. The grants may be only used for planning the configuration and deployment of the community air monitoring system, purchasing and installing air monitoring devices as part of the monitoring system, training and paying persons to operate stationary, handheld, or mobile devices to measure the air pollution, developing data and mapping systems to analyze, organize, and present their air monitoring data collected, and writing a final report on the project as will be required in Subdivision 9. The commissioner must approve the air monitoring technologies, and the commissioner must develop administrative procedures governing the application and grant award process. And priorities must be given to proposed projects that take place in areas with high rates of illnesses associated with exposure to air pollution, promote public access to the transparency of air monitoring data developed through the project, and conduct community outreach to promote awareness and engagement with the project. And after a project ended, a grantee must submit a written report to the commissioner describing the project's findings and results and any recommendations for the agencies, programs, or activities to reduce the levels of air pollution measured by the community air monitoring system. And then the PCA is also required to submit a report to the Committee with Jurisdiction over Environment Policy on any changes in the agency's air monitoring network that will occur as a result of the data that's developed in the program and any actions that the agency has taken or proposed to take to reduce the levels of pollution that impact the EJ area, and any recommendations for legislation, including whether the program should be extended or expanded. And that is the bill, Mr. Chair.
Testifiers, Roxanne O'Brien.
Okay, everybody, please don't get tired of me. I know I'm up here like every year, every bill. But this bill is important because this is part of the same work, right? It's just another angle, and it's unfortunate that we have to make numerous bills in order to get, the government to help protect its community members. But this is the way it is, what we're finding out, which is if we want to get real data and real information about our communities, we can't depend all the time on agencies or on facilities to actually give us the correct information. For example, Northern Metals, committed 9 felonies in 1 month in August of 2019. 9 felonies. So they didn't tell the truth. And a lot of these facilities, if not all of them, are allowed to produce their own information, whether or not it's accurate or not. So this is a way that not only our communities get a chance to learn about what's happening, but we get a chance to be the scientists on the ground who are impacted and learning and able to take that data elsewhere if we need to in order to protect our communities. So again, just another part of it. Thank you very much again for having me. I know y'all tired of me, but I'll be back.
And if you could just state your name for the record.
Okay.
One more time.
My name is Roxanne O'Brien. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to testify for or against the bill? Anyone else? Questions? Representative Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Lee. This may be a question for the MPCA. I'm seeking to understand what does the MPCA currently do to monitor the air in Minneapolis?
Welcome, and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. My name is Frank Kolash. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Air and Climate Policy with Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Representative Schultz, to your question, we have 54 air monitoring sites throughout the state. Half of those are located in environmental justice areas. We monitor for multiple types of air pollutants, including particulate matter and fine particulate matter, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, metals in the air, volatile organic chemicals in the air, carbon monoxide, and then we also look at the composition of particulate matter because that is important for lung health. So within the city of Minneapolis, I don't have that right off my fingertips, but we have a number of air monitoring sites located in Minneapolis near the junction of Highway 35, I-35W, I-94, and 55. We have another monitor in South Minneapolis at the Anderson School. We have monitors in central part of Minneapolis, and we have a number of monitors in the Twin Cities area as well.
Representative Schultz? Any other questions? Representative Lee?
Thank you, Chair, for the consideration.
Representative Jordan?
Mr. Chair, I renew my motion that House File 674 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill.
The bill is laid over. Next up is House File 2076, Representative Pursell. Would you like to move that House File 2076 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So moved.
Representative Pursell, I believe you have the DE1 Authors Amendment.
Indeed, Mr. Chair, if I can move the DE1 Authors Amendment before the committee as well.
And then there are some technical changes from House Research you'd like to incorporate into that.
Please.
DE1. Ms. Taylor, could you walk through the technical changes to be incorporated?
Mr. Chair and members, there's one change. It'd be on line or page 3, line 3, delete board and insert agency.
Thank you.
And then would you like to move the DE1 with the changes incorporated?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that's my motion.
Representative Pursell moves the DE1 with the technical changes incorporated to get the bill in the form the author would like. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The DE1 amendment with incorporated changes is adopted. Representative Pursell to the bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Citizens Board of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency was established in 1967 when the agency itself was established to ensure there was accountability and transparency in the department and served as a check on the actions of the agency staff and commissioner. It went away in 2015 in the dark of night, and House File 2076 is a bill that has been around for most of the time since it was abolished. Over the 48 years of its existence, the MPCA Citizen Board members were appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and there was good discussion in the first Senate committee hearing last week to discuss other processes to potentially confirm members to the board, which I am open to. This board was not, and if reinstated, would not be unique in our state government. Many boards make permitting and or licensing decisions, have regulatory authority and rulemaking authority, such as the University of Minnesota Board of Regents, the Board of Trustees of the Minnesota State Colleges and University System, the Board of Water and Soil Resources, the Board of Animal Health, the Campaign Finance Board, etc. Imagine if more public institutions were run by the public. Isn't that what a democracy should look like? Members of the MPCA Citizens Board are qualified to make these oversight decisions because they are residents of the state of Minnesota, and they are the ones living in the communities impacted by permittees. In a democracy, those who are most impacted should be making the decisions. Many of the past board members have had additional experience and leadership roles, farmers or local business owners, and were well respected and trusted in their communities. You can find at least 2 letters from previous board members in your packet. Some of my constituents feel that the many decisions made here at the Capitol are opaque, complex, and politically motivated. And I've heard from many Minnesotans who feel like the MPCA treats industry as its clients rather than centering people and our natural environment. I am hopeful that by passing this bill to reinstate the MPCA Citizen Board, we can take a step to show leery Minnesotans that we are acting in good faith on their behalf in a transparent and well-informed manner, and that we believe and trust citizens to have the best interests of their communities and future generations in mind when overseeing one of our crucial state agencies, the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I'm grateful to have several testifiers to speak to this bill, as well as letters of support from more than 55 community-led groups in your packet. So now I would like to turn it over to the testifiers, Mr. Chair.
Members, we have to be done at 4:30, so I'm going to limit the testimony to 1.5 minutes instead of 2 minutes. And Representative Jordan is going to be the timekeeper. Steve Morse, Minnesota Environmental Partnership.
Good morning, or good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Got to check the time. My name is Steve Morris, Executive Director of the Minnesota Environmental Partnership, statewide coalition of more than 70 environmental conservation organizations and other allied groups that agree with our mission and our collaborative approach. Community voices have always been and continue to be the driving force behind protecting our great outdoors. Whether it's protecting a local wetland, important natural habitats, our lakes, rivers, and streams, or preventing climate change, it's our neighbors' concerns and dedication that makes the difference. We just saw evidence of that in the last bills you were hearing. That's why MEP is proud to be here today to wholeheartedly support the significant piece of legislation to reestablish the rightful role of community members in managing and protecting the natural resources that define who we are as a state. Thank you, Representative Pursell, for bringing this legislation forward. When the Citizens Board was torn from the structure of the PCA in 2015, it was an initiative from just one chamber of the legislature. I don't believe the Senate even had a committee hearing on this proposal. With this hearing today, this proposal to restore the board has already had more public process than the 2015 repeal. It's also important to recognize that the repeal occurred after Governor Dayton vetoed the initial bill and over his strenuous objections when he is confronted with the total unwillingness of proponents to back off this position that was included as part of the biennial budget bill. Facing the risk of shutting down the operation of state government, Governor Dayton relented and signed the repeal into law.
Thank you.
Is that a minute and a half? It is. All right. Thank you.
James Connie, Renville County Dairy Farmer. Welcome, and state your name for the record.
I'm James Connie. I'm a dairy farmer from southwestern Minnesota. Thank you, Chair Hansen and Representative Pursell, for bringing this bill to the floor. I am here today happy to support the return of the Citizens Board because I feel that we need a Citizens Board, not special interests in our state looking out for the people. Out there, we have environmental justice communities that obviously are being overlooked, and they get included into this new board. I think that's a huge improvement over the old board. I think we should address the elephant in the room here on this and why the board got eliminated. How many of you were here in 2015? A few? Okay. The point is, we had a power situation in the state where a dairy entity, decided that they did not want to be stepped on. They decided that they would use their power to get rid of the board, and they did. And looking back, after the board got eliminated, they went pell-mell ahead. And as a dairy farmer, right now, I look at the fact that this one entity controls 27% of the milk produced in the state. And we look at what we are seeing across. No, that's quick.
Kathleen Doran Norton, League of Women Voters. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kathleen Doran Norton, here in support of HF 2076. I'm a volunteer and one of 2,200 members of the League of Women Voters Minnesota, which represents 35 local leagues and 45 counties through the state. I live in Bridgewater Township, where I served as township supervisor for 12 years. So I'm acknowledging Township Tuesday. It's a great day to talk about the value of democracy, open and inclusive government, and the importance of community voices. No matter how our families came here to Minnesota, we all have a right to healthy lands, clean air, and clean waters. Protecting Minnesota is a responsibility we owe each other. This was recognized when the Citizens Board was formed alongside the MPCA in 1967, the way that we protected Minnesota for 48 years. Reinstating this community board upholds the values of the League of Women Voters: democracy, open and transparent government, and giving a voice back to those who are most affected by government decisions. A voice to our whole community in concert with the scientists hired by our state. And in doing this, we recognize what a wise man said. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. I hope you will support this bill. Thank you for your time today on behalf of the land and water and people of Minnesota.
Thank you. Tim Schaefer. Welcome, and state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Hansen and members of the committee. I'm Tim Schaefer. I'm the legal advocate at COPAL, which is Comunidades Organizando el Poder y la Acción Latina. In my role at COPAL, I work with both our worker center and at the environmental justice team. And I can tell you that I work with people every day who are excluded from the decisions that affect their lives. I don't know if this is intentional or if it's unintentional, but you know, as much as a place like this is open to the public, it's difficult to come here and to speak. And so I want to thank everyone who did that today. I also want to encourage us to pass this bill because we need public oversight of decisions that are made. People need to have a direct say in those decisions, and they aren't getting that right now. I think this is a step in that direction. I think it's a step towards democracy. So I hope that you pass this, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Tony Quillis, Minnesota Chamber of Commerce.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, again, I'm Tony Quillis, Director of Environmental Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Chairman, since 1967, when the PCA board was created, there was no environmental laws basically back then. But since then, the Environmental Protection Agency has been created, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, state and federal Superfund laws, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, better known as RCRA, National Environmental Protection Act, better known as NEPA, and the Minnesota Environmental Protection Act, better known as MEPA, have all been enacted. All of those provide multiple options for public and citizen input on proposed economic development projects here in the state. Additionally, the Environmental Quality Board has a portion of their website set up specifically to educate citizens on the public participation process. They've got documents on community decision-making basics, how to comment on environmental review projects, include a video on how to participate in the environmental review process, and also have an interactive map of all current environmental review projects, a link on how to participate in them, and then lays them over and superimposes them over environmental justice areas. In Minnesota chapters 116 and Minnesota rules 410 are where almost all the public participation process is described, including the citizen petition process and discretionary review by the commissioner.
Thank you.
That's all an open and transparent process,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Pierce Bennett, Minnesota Farm Bureau Federation. And after Pierce, Tamara Nelson, Agri-Growth. Welcome. State your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Pierce Bennett, Director of Public Policy with the Minnesota Farm Bureau, where I have the privilege of representing farmers and ranchers from across the state of Minnesota. I sit here before you in opposition to 2076 and do so for similar reasons as our previous testifier stated. We know there are processes that the MPCA uses to engage in the public. We know that they regulate with the public needs and desires in mind. But more importantly, speaking to my membership, we know how important having the MPCA be able to make decisions based off of their professional knowledge as well as the science that they work within, how important that is that they have the ability to do that. As we think about the 2015 process, I'll admit I am new to Minnesota. You might be able to tell by the accent. If not, howdy. But what I've been told is that that decision came from a place of wisdom to recognize that there was a problem, that the MPCA's decisions were being clogged up or bogged up at times. And so that is where that came from, is my understanding. And I think it's important to recognize that wisdom and that decision. That way farmers who are working with the MPCA to receive permitting or other processes that they go through have the certainty of knowing that those decisions are coming from a place of professionalism and science and knowledge. And with that, thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to continue working on the bill.
Thank you. Tamara Nelson, Agri-Growth. And then next up, Andrew Doerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tamara Nelson. I'm the Executive Director of Minnesota Agri-Growth Council. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization with about 150 members in the entire agri-food chain, from individual farmer to Fortune 500. So we represent a broad point of view, and I'm here today to speak in opposition to House File 2076, although like Pierce, I would be happy to work going forward. As mentioned, our every industry in this state and every individual already operates within a lot of federal and state laws. Many new agencies and requirements have been set up since the late 60s. And so the complexity of the entire process and the load of work that MPCA, our colleagues there, already have to do, we do not believe, would be augmented by a citizens advisory board, because the amount of complexity, it's not just about what one person thinks is right or not, it's the complexity and the science behind the decisions. And I would just offer as evidence, there is a reason why there's a fish and a statement about the fact that their drain goes to the river on every street in Woodbury and everywhere else in this city. And it's because citizens do not pay attention often to the rules or the science behind things that they should or shouldn't be doing, whether it's changing their oil in their own driveway or washing down the paint that they just painted inside of their house. With that, I would just again express our opposition, but our willingness to work with the author. Again, thank you very, very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Andrew Dewar, Minnesota Pork Producers, and then Tom Johnson from the PC. Dewar, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Andrew Dewar, and I'm here today representing the Minnesota Pork Producers Association. I appreciate the opportunity to testify today. The state of Minnesota has a thorough and comprehensive environmental review process guided by standards with which our farmers are committed to working within. Through environmental review processes that exist today for EAWs and NPDES and SDS permits, each of these is made available for public comment and review. This allows questions and comments to be heard and responded to, ensuring a transparent process for the public and those requesting permits and submitting EAWs. This is in addition to any local requirements for public notification and public meetings associated with local permitting. For farmers submitting these permits, it comes at a significant investment of time and money. Minnesota's process is longer and more expensive than any of our neighboring states, and with the power given to this board, the final say on whether a project can move forward after that investment could be denied, even if it meets all the expectations and standards as reviewed by the MPCA and the Commissioner. This level of uncertainty would directly impact our farmers. We believe that the process that exists today properly considers all aspects of environmental review and ensures Minnesotans have the opportunity to engage in the process. With that, Mr. Chair, again, I appreciate the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Tom Johnson, Minnesota Pollution Control Agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Again, Tom Johnson, Government Relations for Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I want to thank Representative Pursell and the advocacy groups for bringing the agency recently into conversations on this legislation. Our understanding is that the primary goal here in reinstating the board is to increase transparency, accountability, and public engagement in the agency's permitting process. Please rest assured these are core values that the agency shares. And I would direct you to the governor's budget recommendations for the MPCA. There are multiple areas where I think our commitment to those values is reflected, including new positions for enhanced engagement, better data for the public, the governor's version of the cumulative impact language that we were referencing before. We've also taken administrative steps beyond the budget to increase transparency and public engagement. And I won't go through those. In closing, reinstating the Citizens Board makes a fundamental change to the structure of the MPCA's authority and enabling statute to change that would affect the regulatory process across all agency programs. We really think that this should include a more robust process where we could contemplate this thoughtfully and deliberately and with the input of all parties, including NGOs, cities, counties, labor groups, permittees. It's also necessary to ask the question of whether the Citizens Board, a structure that was originally crafted when the MPCA was established, is the right structure to meet the moment for today's MPCA. So we do not oppose this legislation, but we would respectfully ask the committee and the author to let the agency have the conversations we need internally and externally before the bill moves further. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to testify for or against the bill? Anyone in the audience? Representative Scraba, and then Representative Lislegard, and then Representative Burkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Pursell, why should political appointees be given the incredible power to be denying permits and to determine the adequacy of an EAW or an EIS?
Representative Pursell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Scraba. That is a good existential question. We have everyone in our executive branch, except for the governor and lieutenant governor, already do that. All of the commissioners, all of the folks who are within that branch of government. So we have the three branches of our government. We all have election certificates. Most of the folks over there do not. I ran a nonprofit, and there was a board of directors that oversaw me. That was their responsibilities. That's true for corporate entities. That's true for a lot of different entities as well.
Mr. Chair, final question. We're going to spend $1.5 million on a board to do something that even the MPCA said, they'd like to be, they're doing it now. I'm just trying to figure out why are we going in that direction? And political appointees for $1.5 million. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Skraba. I thought it was very interesting when Mr. Quillis was talking about House File 637. He talked about, as representative for the chamber, increased public engagement is a good thing. And I fully support that. I absolutely believe that. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant to make sure that we're being as transparent and open as possible with all of our processes.
Representative Lisgard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to the bill author, I appreciate your willingness always to have dialogue and seek feedback. This question isn't to you, it is to nonpartisan. So if a company, any company, follows the process, meets or exceeds both state and federal standards, would the Citizens Board have the authority to overturn the decision made by the agency after they went through the process, followed it, and met the standards?
Representative Pursell.
No, that was.
I'm going to defer to research.
Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chair and members, if you look at the DE1 subdivision 6A, starts on line 2.15, it does say that the agency must make final decisions on the following matters, and that would include issuing, reissuing, modifying, or revoking a permit. So I would say they would have that authority. I would defer to the agency if they want to correct.
Mr. Johnson, and then after this line of questions, we will lay the bill on the table and bring it back up. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think looking at the DE here, the board in this case, when it was established, the board would be the agency. And so what was the, if you could clarify, Ms. Taylor, which line you were looking at? I didn't have that.
Mr. Chair, members, I was looking at subdivision 6A, starts on 2.15. If you look at that line, and then if you look down to 2.29, those in conjunction.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my understanding here is that in 2.15, this is referring to the agency, and that would include both the commissioner and the board in that case, making decisions together. However, there is, I believe, an area here where the board has the ability to review decisions that are made by the agency and overturn those in certain cases.
Representative Lisgard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so just to the committee, I mean, I don't even know why we have a process then if we're just going to have a board that has the ability, regardless of their background, to overturn that. What company in any way, shape, or form is going to spend the time, money, and resources to go through a process to prove that they can meet or exceed both state and federal standards, and then on top of that, after you've passed all tests, Citizens Board comes in and denies it?
Representative Pursell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. The way that this is worded right now, that the board must have a 2/3 majority to overturn the decision made by agency staff or a commissioner. We're human. People make mistakes. With all the responsibilities that commissioner and staff have, this is an additional check. This is an additional place for just extra scrutiny to happen, and it diffuses, some of that pressure and makes more people responsible for doing all the checks and balances in the process, ideally.
Final question before recess.
Okay, this won't be a question, and we can continue afterwards. But I mean, I appreciate that, but I have watched process after process, and that is why people who oppose the process, oppose the decision, are able to challenge it in court. And so I can tell you that if I was an investor looking to do and make an investment, a capital investment rate of return, knowing that I got to spend all this money to go through this process to prove that I can, and then I do, and then 2/3, it doesn't matter if it was 2/3 or not, that is to me where it's just too much. So I hope that we can continue the conversation. I totally respect you. I know what your intent is to make sure that things are done right in the state of Minnesota and we're protecting people's lives and the environment, and I totally respect that. But I would just like to continue to work on this. Thank you.
Representative Pursell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. In 48 years, I don't think there is proof to show that we didn't have investment and interest in our state. And in the 48 years, one EIS environmental impact statement was ordered and 0 were completed. So this doesn't feel like a board that is terribly overreaching in almost half a century.
And so members, we are going to be in recess until 6:30. So we are in recess.